All right, so welcome everybody to the part one of our Civics for Environmentalists series on advocacy. But of course, we say Civics for Environmentalists, but this is going to apply to basically any type of organization that wants to do advocacy and participate. Today's presentation is very much geared towards the state legislature, but there's a lot of these lessons that we use at city council, that we use at county board and other bodies of government as well. We're really going to go into the basics of connecting with lawmakers, building power, and putting yourself in a position to advocate and win on behalf of the campaigns that you want to make progress on. So really excited that you could join us today. And this is part one. We're really not going to do any of the Springfield process today. And we do have a plan to do a City of Chicago process learning lesson as well. So keep an eye on that. But please join us back on January 29th for a longer presentation on Springfield procedure with myself and David McGillis. And again, I'm Jen Walling. I'm the executive director of the Illinois Environmental Council. And I'm super excited to have Colleen Smith on, who's our deputy director. And she's going to share some of the presenting today. And she has way better stories than I do. And so we'll save the good stories for that portion of the event today. I'm sharing my slides here. You can see how many tabs I have open. Hopefully it doesn't cause you a huge amount of stress. But I'm going to present these slides. Great. And we are recording. So thank you so much. Our presentation today is Civics for Environmentalists, How to Win Friends and Influence Lawmakers. This is an advocacy and power building workshop for environmental individuals, environmental organizations, but it could apply to anybody. So a little bit about the Illinois Environmental Council. Our tagline is building power for people in the environment. And we really do look at ourselves in a way of how do we help our whole community build the power that we need to get anything that we want done. Because this sort of power building that comes through many facets of ways that you can build power really sets the stage to get things done more easily. I just like to use this analogy just because I was on this interview earlier this year and all my staff was really sick of it, but I love it because I love soil. And I was on a show talking about soil, and there's really a lot of analogies, and what we're doing is building the soil. We're building it to have enough organic matter to have the right content, the right relationships, if you will, so that people can grow their ideas and really make positive changes for the environment for individuals. We were founded in 1975. We represent over 100 environmental organizations and nearly 500 individuals from throughout Illinois. I know Jeff Sheldon's on the call today. He's our development director that helps with our membership. So if you ever have any questions about becoming a member of the Illinois Environmental Council, either as an organization or an individual, Jeff can hook you up with that. We really value the members that we have and like to provide services for them to make them more effective. So thanks for being on, and a little bit more about what we do there. So today, these are the lessons that we want to bring home, that you will need power to get what you want in Springfield or in any body. You can't just show up and have a lot of hope. I mean, sometimes it happens, but you need to make sure you've got that power that you need to win. Relationships are critical to building power. Messengers are important, and we're going to go through best practices to contact lawmakers and build relationships. So first, we're just going to dig in here, which is that we want you to think about what is your power goal? Where do you want to get in the end? So when we look at power goal, and there's different ways to phrase your power goal. I mean, maybe your power goal is that you're always consulted, you're always involved. Maybe your power goal is you're always consulted first. There's a lot of different ways that you can set a power goal, but our power goal for the Illinois Environmental Council is the ability to control the fate of environmental legislative policy in Illinois, that environmental proposals do not move forward without the support or consent of the environmental community. And from a practical point of view, this has numbers to it. So in order to pass a bill through the Senate and the House, you need 30 state legislators in the Illinois Senate, a majority of 60 state legislators in the Illinois House, and supportive agencies in the executive branch to get anything done. So this is the numeric component. And we definitely recommend when you're looking at any body of government, you're going to want to set this up. And we don't go through this today, but we have a very detailed power analysis workshop where folks can really go in detail into like, where are your members, which votes do you have, et cetera. That brings together a lot of data about these different elected officials to make decisions. And just to give you a little more context, I'm actually not going to get this right because we just have a new General Assembly. So there are 73 Democrats in the House and 45 Republicans, right, Colleen? Because that's 118. And then in the Senate, is it 40 or are we at 41 now with Karina Villa?
41.
Yeah, 41 and 18 is the makeup in the Senate. And not that all Democrats are environmentalists and not all Republicans are anti-environmentalists. So, it's careful to look at it that from that point of view, but, that's just the political partisan breakdown of the Illinois General Assembly right now. So
well,
those are all, go ahead.
I think usually when we talk about, and not that we're getting into our full power analysis today, but if you look at who we consider to be strong supporters of the environment or even lean supporters of the environment, in the House, we're just under 60. We're roughly at 57, 58. There's obviously new members coming in. And in the Senate, we're just above 30. So we were around 31, 32. And that's people who, we hope would be with us or we know will be with us at any given vote. So you can see it doesn't align with the majority that Jen just outlined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to go into this a little more, but if you're working with a coalition, having an understanding of power is something that I have found to be critical. Not to bring up some like kind of sensitive issues, but 2013, we worked a lot on fracking. And a lot of the concern, like the fight that I saw, was because we had disagreements over how much power there was in the state legislature. And so, when we did the count, we really looked at it, we didn't have a majority of the General Assembly to be able to pass the bill. And having that understanding, I think, with your coalition of how many people support the thing that you want and how many are leading and the leaning, and then the work that you need to do to get those leaning people to be supportive and agreeing on where you're at can be a really critical component of doing a campaign as a coalition. Because if you disagree on your power to get things done, or you have a misunderstanding about it, and not everybody is on the same page, that can lead to a lot of conflicts when you're working in a coalition. But like I said, all of these things are going to be pretty useful for any body of government that you might be working with. It's also important to understand where power comes from. And generally in organizing, it's considered the ability to give or take away from a decision maker something that they want. And here are a few things that generally are viewed as power in Springfield. There's money, so campaign contributions, sometimes charitable contributions to a community, those sorts of things can be money. Relationships that you personally have with lawmakers or staff. Expertise can be something that power comes from. So really knowing your issue well and being somebody that is trusted. People, and then media exposure. Generally in the environmental community, we really feel that our strongest power comes from people, and we make that display by things like our lobby days or the number of letters that we can get sent in to lawmakers about an issue so that they know that this thing is being called for. So these are just some of the things that that power can come from in working in a state legislative context. But there's more, of course, and like I said, in this general, the ability to give or take away from a decision maker something that they want is a really important part. And what we're seeing here is things like, you might get the person bad media exposure. They might look bad. They don't want that. You might associate with them with something that they don't want to be. So there's lots of ways here that you can get power and you can lose it. But I want to bring forward this central theory of change. And I know this is a little controversial because I think not everybody can come to that point of view, but I'm going to put forward what my theory of change is on this. So it's very opinion, but this is something I saw in a presentation and it resonated with me, that votes are taken based on values, relationships, and beliefs. Votes are not taken based solely on data and facts. I'm going to bring that back here as well. And I know a lot of us coming from the environmental community, science is really important, and it's really important for science to guide policy. But kind of unfortunately, in order for science to guide policy, the people who are making the votes need to be people who think that science is important as a value. And I hate to do that because I know science is facts, science is experimentation, science is a hypothesis and a conclusion. You know, all of these things, science is scientific research, but you need to come at it with a decision maker who values those things and values the facts that you're getting at. And so we often, a lot of our member affiliates, and maybe it's some people on the call I'm calling out a little bit now. A lot of our member affiliates will often be like, I would like to drop off this 30-page report about this particular issue. And there'll be some lawmakers that might read it, but the lawmakers that are going to read it and are going to be interested in it come from a perspective that they value the organization that's giving the material, or they value just that background information. But there might not be a lot. You're going to get a lot stronger response, even if you do have a 30-page document. If that lawmaker knows who you are and knows that you're a trusted source, they're going to be more likely to read the thing that you gave them and really dig into it. Although the number of lawmakers that will read anything more than a page or two, not a lot. There is staff, and often staff will really dig into those long items. But I just want you all to think about this. This doesn't just apply to the state legislature, it applies to voters too. That a voter will, votes are taken based on values, relationships, and beliefs. So what they value, how well they know a person, what they believe in, and not taken based solely on data and facts. So when you're thinking about something, this is from Organizing for Social Change by Midwest Academy, which is like one of my favorite organizing books that I really recommend that you look at, especially for like a full campaign plan, organizing and developing power. And they put these together as illusions about power, that all too often groups believe that they're going to win just because they're right, because truth is on their side, because they have the best information and it's all spelled correctly, and they have fact sheets with lots of great graphic design, or they have like a really great social media presence, and they speak for large numbers of people. All of these things may look like power, but without the connection to values, relationships, and beliefs, it's not the sort of power that you need to actually influence those lawmakers to take the votes that you need. Even if you have a large number of people and you're speaking for them, if they're not contacting their lawmakers, if they're not making themselves known, or if there's a lawmaker that just like doesn't value their constituents or that particular constituency, it might not be somebody that's making an impact. And, similar, I just talked about having the best information and it's all spelled correctly, having a really great graphic design fact sheet, having a lot of like charts and stuff. That information can be important, and I've definitely seen it used in Springfield. But in order to get it to be a point where it is used, first the lawmaker has to believe the source where it's coming from and think that source is important. So these are some illusions about power that we may think is right, but just doesn't play out in the dynamics of how the state legislature works. So I want you to keep that in mind, and I'm happy to talk about it in the questions. I think we only have about half an hour of presentation, so we'll have plenty of time for questions. You should feel free to write them in the chat in the meantime. But the point that we want to make, and this is before I toss it over to Colleen, is that democracy does actually work sometimes. But democracy can work. We can develop the power that we need. A lot of us are the little fishes. We're the do-gooders. We're the people who don't have a ton of campaign contributions to give out to state lawmakers. And so if we are getting together, we can organize here against the big fish, and we can and will win. So this is the concept we want to get at. And now I'm going to pass it off to Colleen to talk about decision makers and messaging.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I will try to tell some interesting stories. I'll do my best. But, when we talk about decision makers, and the entire purpose of what Jen just alluded to and what we'll get into is, if you don't have the right decision maker, then you're not going to get the thing that you want. So who is that one person? Is it an agency director? Is it a committee chair? Is it another stakeholder potentially? Is it the governor? If you're spending all your energy focused on, one person that you think might be able to make a decision, but they're really not that person, you're obviously not going to get the results that you're hoping for. So being really clear on who that decision maker is important. And then moving on, not just who they are, but what influences them. So power mapping is incredibly important. Jem, I'll have you move to the next slide. And there's different versions of power mapping. As Jen alluded to, we have a really comprehensive power analysis on various environmental issues that look at some of these questions. If your decision maker is the governor, who is he listening to? What kind of things is he influenced by? Jen already alluded to that the message is important, and so are messengers. Sometimes our community is not the best messenger on a topic, and we'd know that depending on this power mapping. So how influential is is their church? Is their family? What's their background? Doing some research on a decision maker is important. And even when you're thinking about your legislators, knowing something about them before you go into that meeting is incredibly valuable. Did they come from an insurance background, or did they come from being a teacher, right? They may be then looking at the world in two very different ways, and they may be influenced by different things. So power mapping is really important to get an understanding of who that decision maker is. And then I think we'll talk about how do you win friends and influence people. I think this is where I usually joke I'm good at one of these things and less so than the other. But
and we should. This is copied from Dale Carnegie's "How to Win Friends and Influence People," the book. Just to give credit here.
There you go. Very good. So some of this seems common sense, but are things that I often do not see in meetings in Springfield or with other elected officials. So showing respect for the other person's opinions also gets to some of these other provisions of trying earnestly to see things from their point of view, listening, being sympathetic. As Jen already alluded to, people make decisions based on values and relationships, and you have to meet them where they are. Something Jen mentioned about the science that I think people don't realize is there's often conflicting science, even if we know it's maybe not accredited or the best science. When we think about some of these big issues, we may have that 30-page report, but industry may as well. And for a decision maker who is not a scientist, confronted with two competing scientific reports about an issue, they're going to trust the person they know and their relationship with them before they'll trust who to decide what scientists that they don't know, right? So you're never going to get these relationships if you don't act this way. Never say you're wrong. I'll be very honest. There have been legislators who have had really bad meetings with constituents where they've been yelled at, and then they turn to me or Jen and they say, we're not meeting with those people again, right? Like they feel fundamentally disrespected. And even though a legislator works for you and is elected by you, they're a real person and they're working on a ton of other issues. So just be really mindful of that. That's also why you should just be friendly. This goes not just to the elected official and your legislator, but staff. Staff is often the gatekeeper, whether in district or in Springfield. And certainly the nicer you are to a staff person is going to, make a difference in the meeting that you're able to get or the time from that person. And then starting with questions to which the other person will answer yes is also important. If you're starting a meeting with, I urge you and, I demand you to say yes to this bill, without giving some softer context of asking, did they see themselves supporting advancements in our water infrastructure? What does that look like in their community? Trying to get at what these issues mean for them. And it's different for all decision makers. So I think that flexibility is important. appeal to their nobler motives. I think this can be one, maybe a little PR-ish, but demonstrating that you, as someone who has a family, definitely doesn't want to see your children impacted by lead poisoning and drinking water. And certainly you could understand why other families are really concerned about the threat to their children, right? I mean, playing at the heartstrings a little bit, but that's important. And again, so how you win friends, how you influence people, listening, hearing how they're perceiving an issue, and then responding to that message. And then the last thing here, throw down a challenge, means we're not telling you to just be nice and nod your head and ignore if they're spouting misinformation or, saying no outright. Throw down a bit of a challenge. Ask them why they don't think this is an important issue or how they came to that conclusion. It is appropriate to do that, especially when you've built in all these other things. Think, why do you build relationships with elected officials? There's so many reasons, and many of them aren't even listed here. For you as an individual or for you as an organization, legislators have a reach. They have newsletters, they have social media. They can help promote something that you're interested in or working on. And they also have good relationships with other people in the district. So if you're working on a pilot for electric vehicle charging, and they know a community college that's really interested in having one, they can make that connection. And then they can also just be added credibility to you and your organization if they're attending an event that you're at, or they're helping promote that. And then for them, it benefits because they're often looking towards not just Jen and I, but who in their district do they feel like understands this issue, can speak to it. Again, legislators are ultimately responsible to their constituents, and in varying degrees are they responsive to them. But having that rapport with your legislator, will cover ways in which to do that, means that they'll depend on you. They'll say, okay, I know Judy, has a daughter at this school, and maybe I can reach her opinion on school funding or what have you. And they also want to be seen as being responsive and in the community. And then there are other pieces, again, that aren't listed here, where maybe there's a grant program that they're aware of. And if you have that relationship with them, they can provide an opportunity for you and your organization. Or if I look at what's been happening the last year with this pandemic, certainly legislator offices have been really critical for providing people with the resources they need during these times. So there's a lot of reasons why you should build relationships. Some more reasons why to develop power. We write because they listen mostly. Again, if you're someone who has that relationship with an elected official, going back to how to foster that, right? No one ever is eager to return that really angry email they received, right? That's not a good way to build that relationship. But if you're someone who demonstrates a very human interest and a position on the environment, and they know that and they get to know you, then when a bill does come up and it is Eduardo who's emailing and saying, I really hope you vote this way, not I demand because you've let me down so many times, but just being honest about, this is something that matters to me and I have this relationship with you, they're more likely to take that. So that's important. And I think accountability, the cycle of accountability, what it means for certainly electoral work, and then just the pre and the post vote. We can't be mad at our decision makers for how they vote if we never ask them to vote the way we want them to. And if they don't know us, something that I don't think we touched on yet is, you never want the first engagement to necessarily be an outright ask. If you build a relationship with someone, if you get to know them, then the ask is based on that relationship and isn't just outright, demanding that they vote a certain way. So if you have that relationship, if you can then ask them to vote a certain way, then when they don't, you can tell them, I'm really disappointed you didn't vote that way. Or if they do, thank them. There are many people on this call who have legislative champions as their legislators, and that they'd like to hear from you as well. I think we kind of covered a few of these other reasons. How to contact your state legislator. This is obviously a talk we've done before because it says in-person meetings, but virtual meetings are also very good. You can't beat just one-on-one conversation with a legislator. So if you can, whether it's you or a group of people that you're working on an issue with, ask for a meeting. Maybe they can't give you an hour, but maybe they can give you 15 minutes, and that's really valuable time. The kind of second best is a personal letter or an email. The more you get to know about your legislator, the more you'll know what kind of forms they respond to most. Some are very frequently in their emails. Many don't read personal letters, but you'll kind of get that. Phone calls can also be good. Typically if you're calling a district or a Springfield office, you are talking to staff. So the legislator may, hear that they got calls on a subject, but it won't necessarily associate as much as a personal email would. Another way, of course, is form emails. You will all receive IEC emails, and that's how you attended today. So that we send out action alerts asking you all to contact your legislators. Both Jen and I worked in the district for legislators, and we know how important all these forms are, but certainly if I get 200 emails in a day about an issue, that legislator is going to pay attention. And then, of course, social media is increasingly important. Some have very strong social media presences. And, I have definitely built relationships with people in a way I didn't think I would because of social media. And then attending an event can also be really helpful. I think that also can, for many of you, environment isn't the only thing you care about, right? I know there are so many social justice champions on this call right now. Or if going back to that power mapping, maybe you run into a legislator at your church or the grocery store, any of those ways, or they have a town hall. Showing up for them is also really important. And they always appreciate having more bodies in the room. This is just a chart for, what works, what doesn't. I think I kind of covered this. In person is always best. Individualized contact before form. And then going down, faxes. Most people don't have fax machines anymore. But I think this really helps hammer in, again, how much constituents do have power with meeting their elected officials. And then basic tips in advocacy. I think we covered a few of these again, but being polite, you would think in this year, we don't have to continue to tell people to just be nice, but whether or not someone shares your exact position and beliefs on a matter doesn't mean that they don't earn the degree to which you should just listen to them. So be polite to legislators, be polite to staff, be understanding. Again, the power of thank you. Thank them for taking the time to meet with you or hearing you out, for supporting an issue. And if they opposed it, back to that accountability message, let them know that you're disappointed that they weren't there, but give them the opportunity to be better in the future. There are many legislators who we've moved along because we didn't hold them just for that one vote that we didn't agree with that one time. We've continued to try and move them and build our power that way. Know their position is something that's really important. It is a little cringeworthy to see people ask someone to co-sponsor a bill if that person is not only a co-sponsor, but has been at every press conference and is already a champion, right? And similarly, you don't want to go into a meeting asking someone to support something if they're completely on the other side of. Keeping it brief, also something people don't do enough of. And then making an ask and letting them answer can be difficult. And certainly for myself as well, you just need to ask the thing for the decision maker that you want them to do and give them the opportunity to answer. Sometimes that involves taking a sip of water or just pausing. But if you make an ask and then you fill that silence, you'll never get the answer you wanted. So not always the easiest thing, but make sure you have that clear ask before you go into the meeting. Make sure you ask it and make sure you get an answer. And I think I'm turning it.
I think the next slides are me, but I'll just
Back
add
over to
in
Jen.
a little last tip here that I like to use is that, and Colleen sort of referred to this in the How to Win Friends and Influence People. There's a new lawmaker that I am not sure is going to be on our side. I like to ask them to say yes to a small thing before I build them up to ask for bigger things. So it might just be like, we just did this thing in the Illinois Senate where we asked a bunch of lawmakers to sign on to something that said we wanted fewer copies to be filed, to use less paper. And like, we were able to get like a lot of Republican lawmakers that might not be interested, that were brand new, but they said yes to this tiny little thing that we asked them. And like that, yes, maybe it's like we ask them for something bigger next. And when they see that there's not consequences, that they're not hit during their election, they don't get negative press about it, they don't get negative letters about it, it makes it more and more comfortable to them to move in the direction of saying bigger yeses. And we've taken a lot of people down that pathway. They don't always get to where I would like them to go, but it is a way to move people that might be a little nervous about partnering with you to be full partners. So that's just another thought. But I am going to go into a little bit of Judy said we were taught to make our ass sit there in silence no matter how long it takes. Yeah, that silence is powerful when you do that, whether it's fundraising or elected officials. But I am gonna head into here. I'm ending with a little bit of like the legal portion of like what you can do as part of a nonprofit organization. So I'm going to have more specific info in the next few slides, but a lot of you I know are with 501c3, IRS, nonprofit organizations that are tax deductible. And I will say, like, yes, you can do advocacy. I'm going to talk about how much you can do in a second, but there are legitimate reasons you may not want to get involved in advocacy. I don't recommend it because I think that's not using your voice as fully as you could. But you also may have a board that's nervous about it, and maybe you want to take them down the road. But I do recommend, like every nonprofit, you should develop a relationship with your elected officials from top to bottom. And you have to do it before you have a problem, because if there ends up, any nonprofit can have a problem because you are regulated by the government. Some of you may get government money, some of you are IRS, some of you have 990s with the AG's office. Well, everybody does. So there are ways where you might have a problem no matter who you are. So knowing your elected officials, having them know who you are on a basic basis, unless they like really hate your issue, just developing that relationship is super important. So add them to your newsletter distribution list, invite them to attend events. And you can, you do have to be careful with this when you get into candidates, just in terms of who you give the mic to, but I can provide some advice on that. You can attend their events such as town halls or non-political forums. You can invite them on a tour or site visit with your staff. You can give them district specific information on the issue that you work on. So for example, we every other year give lawmakers a map of all of the preserved open space in their district so they know how it impacts them. In Clean Energy Jobs Act, we have a list of how many jobs on clean energy are in each district. So this is my pitch to you nonprofits. Lobbying, yes, you can, but remember, I am a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer for this. So there's a couple of tests here. One is the insubstantial part test. This is generally considered to be less than 5% of the organization's activities. If you're not doing too much, there's really nothing you have to do. It's insubstantial part test. You are fine. You just do the thing. And what we say with lobbying, you cannot endorse elected officials ever as a nonprofit. Never, ever, ever. And you should be careful in terms of like with a candidate, like who you're giving the mic to, but you can work with elected officials. But lobbying means, and I'm going to get into specifically what that means. But if you're doing more than 5%, you can go up to 20% overall lobbying, of which only 25% of that can be grassroots lobbying. And there's two types of lobbying. Direct lobbying is any communication with the legislator that expresses a view about legislation. Grassroots lobbying is communication to the general public that expresses a view about a specific issue and includes a call to action. So there is in lobbying a three-part test in what is considered lobbying for the IRS. And I will bring that up, but like the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois have a much more expansive definition of when you need to register for lobbying than the IRS does. So if we go back here, there's the parts that you need to be communicating with a lawmaker with a call to action about a specific piece of legislation. So things that actually are not lobbying, and this is from Advocates for Justice, I think, but educational communications that do not mention a specific piece of legislation. So if you just want to write a piece about bobcat hunting and why it is bad, and you never mention the bill that bans bobcat hunting, cool. Or you actually can do it in a way where you write about the bill and you mention the bill and the bill number, but you never say, you know, lawmakers should support this, lawmakers should oppose this. You just like trash all over bobcat hunting. Fine, that's not lobbying under IRS terms. Communication to the general public about a specific piece of legislation that does not express a call to action also isn't lobbying. But I also say this because foundations rarely fund lobbying activities because they're taxable. Educating lawmakers or the general public is fully fundable. So, you know, if your issue is, but I don't know why I'm so into bobcat hunting today. But you know, if you're funded to do some education on bobcat hunting and you take a lawmaker out to a wildlife rescue to meet bobcats, you take a legislator out to a nature site to just be like, this area is not good enough for bobcats, you know, then that's just educating lawmakers and it's fully fundable. So that's why I bring some of that up. This is a bigger question, is should you register as a lobbyist? The lobbying laws in the state of Illinois and the way that they impact community level organizations and community activists really keep me up at night. So there's some exemptions to registering as a lobbyist in the state of Illinois. So if you're bringing people on a specific lobby day, individuals or entities that are participating in a grassroots lobbying event, you don't need to register. If you're receiving no compensation other than reimbursement for expenses, up to $500. So if you're spending less than $500 on an individual in your staff who is lobbying, and that has to include salary, it has to include your travel expenses, etc., then you don't need to register. So if you're a volunteer, you don't need to register, or if you're just not spending a lot. Or if you're just having IUC do it for you and all you did is a lobbying meeting, you don't need to register, because we have 6 staff members that are registered as lobbyists just to be safe. But if you do, you need to pay $300 per organization and $300 per individual each year. I think there's a lot of problems with some of this. I also will say you know, when you register to lobby at the state, technically the definition is influencing. So if you're influencing an elected official, you have to register, not just meeting that 3-part IRS test for lobbying. But there's never really been a bunch of lawsuits over, like, you know, were you influencing a lawmaker by, you know, X, Y, and Z. There's not a lot out there, so you're probably safe. But just be cautious, because the fines on this are high. The city of Chicago has had a lot of fines that have been directed at people who were not registered. But right now at the city level, there is a nonprofit. Well, I don't know that they actually passed it, but there'll be a nonprofit waiver. So that's just an example of what you need to look out for. So this is Colleen and my emails. You should definitely feel free to be in touch with us. Yeah, the nonprofit waiver is available for 2021 at the city of Chicago. And we'd asked about the slides. We will send the slides around and the YouTube link to this to everybody who participated today. So we will get that to you and provide some resources. But now I will stop sharing and see all of your faces. This is such great attendance for this event. We're so pleased. But feel free to ask us any questions that you may have. And Colleen, are there any in there that you thought we should answer?
Yeah, Renee asked a good question about, how do you know someone's position? You may know if they're a co-sponsor or not a co-sponsor. Some of you may know that like even being a co-sponsor can mean they are not fully committed. They're kind of a co-sponsor in name only. So how do you find out about other forms of support / non-support? I would say one good way, as all of you are aware of IEC, is the IEC scorecard we release every year in August. We did a little bit different of one last year where we actually released lifetime scores and then demonstrated some scoring based on issue area. We have some legislators that are really strong on conservation, but may never be with us on energy, right? They're kind of the interesting ones. So looking for how else they voted on other things is important. I often, with new lawmakers, will look at their campaign websites and go under issues and see if they even mention environment. Like there are certainly some that have a whole, climate change is the biggest threat of our lifetime. And then there are some that don't mention it at all. And I kind of get an immediate, okay, I think I know where this person's going to be. But just looking at how else they voted and an IEC's scorecard can be a good way to do that. And maybe what other bills they've sponsored too, if they're sponsoring a bill to, have 100 new coal mines in Illinois, then maybe we know where they stand on, solar energy. But Jen, do you have any other thoughts on how you might know a little bit about someone's position? And I guess the building the relationship. But
I will tell a funny story of, like the website stuff once. One time I teach a class at University of Illinois in the fall. And one time I had this state rep come talk to the class. And he repeatedly was talking about how important the environment was to him. And I had told the class he was coming in advance and they have to ask questions. But so the very first question was, if the environment's so important to you, why don't you have it on your website? I was like, why is it on your website? So that one, that was really amusing. But, just all in addition to what Colleen said, like doing your research is really important. But there are lawmakers who just will not tell you how they're going to vote on a thing. And so it might be me or Colleen ask in direct lobbying. It might be groups of constituents with them and we'll tell them. But like on some of those, if we need an answer, we are going to roll deep. So like, we're not going to give up on trying to get an answer before the vote comes, especially if it's a critical vote to that. So, I know there's actually a particular lawmaker from downstate that was a brand new lawmaker who very easily could have signed on to our clean energy bill, but wasn't doing it. And we are very not happy. So, in the end, like we did a forum in his district that had 100 people at it. We had a lot of different individual lobbying visits. Faith in Place did a visit that had 6 reverends and a pastor that were very why aren't you on this? And bringing the, bringing God into why aren't you on this? He really came to us afterwards, just you really, really rolled deep on me. And I have to do this now. And so there's times when we really want to get an answer where we're just going to be dogged about it. But I think that it can't just be one individual being dogged about it. So if you're somebody and you just bother an alderman's office every day, you're just that's annoying. And that person's just not going to take your call, or they're just going to be polite with you and they're going to hang up. When we talk about rolling deep, it's not just us. It's how do we roll deep with our whole coalition, hearing from a lot of different voices that bring it up to that particular lawmaker. So, how do you get the labor to come and say, this is important to me too? How do you get, so rolling deep on this sort of stuff can be really important. So
yeah, the municipal leader. I mean, it could be any, going back to that power map, who we think that person listens to. I was just going to add too, sometimes it's communication isn't about an ask. And I think we already shared that, but kind of 2 other quick habits is, one, if you felt like you left a meeting and you didn't get your ask in, or you asked the question and then quickly didn't let it sit in silence, and you never felt like you resolved where that person is, you can always follow up with an office. And just, no matter what, you should always follow up after a visit, thank them, provide any materials you said you would, but you can also say, I'm not really sure where we left that meeting. Can I count on your support for this initiative? Do you have further questions before you make a position? So like, that's okay to continue that ask. And then if it is just you and you're trying to continue to influence someone, to Jen's point, you should bring in friends and other messengers. But instead of just harping someone about, this one bill every 2 weeks, like, hey, where are you at on that? Hey, where are you at on that? Hey, where are you at on that? Maybe you see an article that says that a new school put up solar panels. And maybe it's just sending them that. And it's not, hey, have you changed your mind on the Clean Energy Jobs Act? But hey, did you know this school down the road from us just put up solar panels? And this is the kind of thing that would be possible. There are ways to nuance what you continue to share with legislators.
Yeah, because and what Colleen is pointing at there too is like, it can't just be like, it's not just a one-way exchange where that lawmaker is doing something for you. You have to provide the case where it's doing something for them. So it's just, that is the fact of life, whether you're influencing your kids to do something, your condo board, or a lawmaker, you have to look at it from how it benefits that other person. So Julie had asked a question: if you're pushing for a cause that doesn't get enough support during the targeted session, do you have a philosophy on how you return back to it at a later time? And Julie, are you talking like within, and I can see you, are you talking like within like a legislative session or within like a visit?
Yeah, let's say this past, legislative session in Springfield, you didn't get everything that you wanted, but still want to continue pushing for it. How do you kind of reconvene your coalition and continue pushing at the next opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially this year because nothing went anywhere in 2020. So, I mean, like this is something that we talk about with our coalition every year. And, there's times where if you put in a really strong proposal and it won't go anywhere, maybe there's a point at which you need to talk to your, the people in your coalition and just be like, you know what, hey, we got to cut some of this out. So like we've worked a lot on neonicotinoid pesticides. And I think, we've worked on banning them, spent a lot of time on it. It really hasn't moved in any way that we'd like it to. So I think like this year where it's headed is just a ban on neonics on state lands. And so like that is when we're kind of cutting back on it. But, with any of it, like, trying to get yourself into a stronger and stronger position every year is really important. Understanding where there's support and such, using the opportunities you have. I mean, I'll just give like, we just had a fire drill with the lead service line bill that we're trying to do, where we're trying to get all the lead service lines in the state replaced. And there was a big fire drill over the weekend where, and what I say by fire drill is like, it was added to the Black Caucus agenda and we had this narrow window to try to advance it. And it didn't end up going forward, but I think we were able to use that narrow window to really, really figure out, in addition to lawmakers not committing, there can be stakeholders that like really try to manipulate you by delaying what you're working on. And like sometimes when they're presented with something where it's put in their face, they will give you more information about whether they support or oppose it. And so, just always trying to put yourself into a stronger position, creating those moments of crisis where people like need to react, really helps. But I don't know, Colleen, do you have any thoughts?
Sometimes it's really technical. Like maybe you started, and we have a new speaker of the House in Illinois, so we're all in a totally different world right now. But if you started the bill in the House and it's a bill that you think is going to go to this committee and it's not favorable, but in the Senate you might be able to get it to a related committee that's a little bit more favorable, start in the Senate next year, right? Like, so there are some kinds of like, what was our strategy? Did we have the right path? Did we mobilize our grassroots early enough? Did we make a compelling media narrative? There's all kinds of questions about how do we need to bring this back, in addition to the ones that Jen raised that I think are really important. I saw Francis ask a question about when IEC contacts lawmakers, how do I participate? I hope all of you are signed up to get IEC's emails, but we will send, Tucker, Barry, our communications directors on Zoom, we'll send emails alerting you of opportunities to fill out what is a what we call form email, but we'll also send emails all throughout the legislative session with our bill numbers of what we're working on. And so you could always just send an email to your legislator and say, I understand all these bills are introduced and support the environment. Will you co-sponsor all of them, right? But the action alerts are one hopefully really easy way, or retweeting us on social media, sharing Facebook things like that can also be helpful.
So for Colleen, when I
Good question.
contact influence lawmakers, how can I participate?
Yeah, I think that was just the way in which people can fill out action alerts. And I guess our lobby days as well. We have done a clean energy lobby day for the past, we did 2 last year and 2 the year before, and occasionally we'll do other lobby days on other issue areas. So you can always participate in that. And again, all that information is shared through our communications channel. I wonder if Jen has thoughts about this bothering legislators out in the wild. I think it maybe depends on your relationship with them, but what do you think, Jen? Can you just go up
Marley from CivPAC, some of my favorite people wrote about sitting in an animal hospital waiting room with their legislator for over an hour. It felt so awkward to approach them. I think in a situation like that, I mean, you definitely like especially right now, don't go up to somebody in a COVID waiting room and be like, hey. But like an animal room hospital, you're sitting there. I think it's fine. I think lawmakers like to be recognized. I mean, I think there may be occasions where they're like, I look awful. I'm in the grocery store with yoga pants on, maybe, but I think they like to be recognized. So I think just a simple, oh, hey, representative, it's really great to see you. Just wanted to say hi. And if they take the conversation further, then you can talk with them. But I definitely would not approach a lawmaker in a public place and be like, why aren't you on CJA? I think take it from a casual conversation of the way you would, run into, somebody you didn't know well from high school. Just hey, how are you doing? And just wanted to say I recognized you, and etc. And of course, flattery always works. So if you do know something about that lawmaker where you can be like, damn, I really appreciate your work on criminal justice reform, fan over it. They love that. I mean, but otherwise just adding some level of privacy. I'm just personally not a big fan of protesting in front of people's houses because it can involve their children, that sort of stuff. And I know it happens, and I know that that is the thing that is an influence, but yeah, I mean, having, there's a lot of lawmakers that Colleen and I have close personal friendships with that, go beyond the legislative stuff, and it's helpful. So
I'm seeing Judy, and I was just going to respond in the chat, but I'll just say now, she shares that in Winnebago County, they invited a legislator to join a Forest Preserve Commission tour, and the one person who attended has been a strong ally ever since. I think Jen and I would say, yes, we love doing tours with legislators, so much so that I can't remember when you kayaked the Vermilion with Chad Hayes, but at least 5 times a year, either Jen or this legislator who no longer is in office, but will share the same story. It is a staple of IEC in the Capitol. Everyone knows that Jen threw this lawmaker into the river. But it was, it ended up being great, and he's then a supporter, but you don't have those experiences necessarily in the district office.
So Kate asked, how do you sort between a genuine concern that a lawmaker has with a piece of legislation and something they're using as an excuse not to support? So, I mean, I'll just some of this takes relationships and knowing the lawmaker. I often refer to it as there are some lawmakers that want me to get them a unicorn before that they'll support a particular proposal. They'll just be like, I'm interested in your proposal, but I want you to do X, Y, and Z and get me X, Y, and Z information that kind of doesn't exist. And you kind of have to understand that really I don't know how to do it other than experiencing knowing the person as to whether getting that information for them is actually going to change their mind or not. I'll just, the particular unicorn one, Representative Mike Fortner was a really strong ally in the Environmental Caucus and head of the Republican head of the House Environmental Caucus for a while. And I often would refer to him that way, but he was a scientist and he actually was influenced by the scientific reports that we gave him. And so like occasionally when I would get him all of the information he'd asked for, he'd be there for us. But you were right that there's a lawmakers that just will put a lot of excuses in front of you. And this is also another reason why, you know, having a lot of different messengers and seeing what they say to all of the different people in your coalition and a lot of the different voices can really help just get rid of the excuses as to why they don't want to commit to you about why they're going to support. And so, you know, that's the way we do it, or we'll hire a contract lobbyist on some things if we have to, that just has personal relationships, if it's somebody that is hard to address. But, you know, this is where the rolling deep with different messages and different messengers is how we can sometimes handle this.
My only other small thing to say, and I know we're close to time, is that, you know, this really is about being there as a resource. That's one thing Jen and I say to every new lawmaker. We are here to be a resource for you. Just point blank, whatever information you need. And to the example or the question Kate asked, I remember when we were trying to fight the endangered species rollback bill that the Farm Bureau was pursuing, I had two different legislators both being like, I just need more information on this. I just need more information about this. They're saying this, you're saying this. And to both of them, I just kept providing more information. And one of them, you know, probably was always going to vote for it against our wishes. And one of them ended up not voting for it and being neutral on the bill, and just said, you know, you kept getting me information and I really appreciated that. And I still need more on this. So even if you're not successful, I think just, you know, getting them what you can, even if they don't listen at the end of the day. But
just making sure we cover this. We are going to do witness slips the next session, like Colleen put in here. Yes, the C3 can spend as much time as it wants developing legislation before it's introduced to the lawmaker without, like, that's not lobbying, because there's not a bill there, according to the IRS. But once you have a bill and a bill number, and actually rulemaking is not lobbying under the IRS. So if you're doing something that's not state legislation, that's at JCAR, or if you're doing something that's litigation, not lobbying. And then I guess let's end with this like question, you know, like, what is the best way to communicate with lawmakers? Colleen sort of asked this, but from Union of Concerned Scientists, you guys have some really great reports and some great websites, but like, you know, very like, it's basically representative for or like some scientists that's, you know, like in the legislature that's going to read it. So, and they do add, you know, some credibility and some expertise to what you're putting together, but definitely one-pager executive summaries. But even better than one-pager executive summaries is a one-page executive summary about how the thing explicitly impacts the district where they represent. Like, that is gold. Even if they don't really know who you are, it can be helpful for them to just like look at this and be like, oh my God, look at the heat impact that climate change is going to have in my legislative district, which I know UCS has. But, you know, regardless of any information you're putting forward, you should do the things that we suggest in terms of building relationships with lawmakers, no matter where you're from or what organization. And this is just life advice. Build relationships with people before you need something from them, because you know, having your first ask be like, I got this emergency, I need you to take care of it. You know, for anybody that's tough. Like, do I trust this person? What's going to happen to me? Build your relationships, and then you will be in a better position when somebody asks you for something or you have an emergency. It's not always possible. I know there's a lot of groups on here we've worked with when you've had an emergency, but those are the things you got to say. So we really appreciate everybody getting on. Thank you, Colleen, for your great advice and stories. Our emails were in those slides, so definitely feel free to contact us and ask us for further information. I love helping to predict what might happen with a piece of legislation and helping with strategy. So, you know, contact us if that's something that you need. But I hope that you can join us on the 29th, where we're going to do something a little more clinical on procedure in Springfield and where it comes from. So thank you, everybody. We really appreciate this, and we will have this whole presentation on YouTube, and we will share slides. So thanks for joining.